Welcome to TGIF, and our word of the day is example.
Like, for example? What? Examples. Don't we use examples all the time? And I guess if my toilet breaks, for example, I call an electrician. Or is that a wrong example?
Wrong example.
I think we're going to find out today how the word example is very important in how we take that in to our daily living.
Yeah, and if you remember, we are in the book of Ezekiel. And Ezekiel, that very beginning we only did one chapter. It was basically his visions. He had these visions from God. And then chapter 2 and 3 were his calling into following God and making sure that God made a point to him that it was going to be a hard calling too. So there's a lot of challenges. And then all of a sudden we have this chunk of material. Look how many chapters they had to read. Chapters 4 through 24. Why such a big section? Because it is example after example after example of people not living a life of faithfulness to God. And so we are focusing towards the end of this, chapter 22, verse 30.
I looked for someone who might rebuild the wall of righteousness that guards the land. I searched for someone to stand in the gap in the wall so I wouldn't have to destroy the land, but I found no one.
So we have this example of a wall of righteousness, though, understanding that while there was a wall around the city, the people were living relatively in a secured wall system, but the wall of righteousness was gone, even amongst the leaders. And so this is really going directed towards the leaders and the people of Israel, saying, God calling them out and saying, hey, you're not living in as an example to the people around you. You don't even acknowledge me. You go after other gods. So God is looking for that person to build the wall, repair the wall of righteousness, and he's not finding them anywhere. So a person who is going to build this trust has to stand in the gap, right? You need to be trustworthy. You need to be able to know who God is to stand in the gap. And I think a lot of times in our own communities, we're trying to look around at everything going wrong in the community rather than saying, oh, how did God design me in a way that I could be an example and I could stand in a hole that lacks any righteousness? We know that Jesus becomes the perfect example of righteousness. And we know that the generations that would follow him, us included, will fall away and have problems of what that means. So these chapters are filled with example through visions, through imagery, through symbols, and not only the anger of God, because this is definitely, if you read this chapter, you will get the sense of God's anger, but about the troubles that are going to lie ahead, because we know Ezekiel is going to be carted off with the rest of them, to captivity. And so where's the hope? Where's the hope? What do we have each day as an example and hope?
I remember when the kids would get out of the car when they were going to regular school, I would always say, be an example or set the example. And let's think about that for a minute. Or who is the example when we say, be the example, set the example? That's that Christ-like. We'll never become Christ, but that Christ-like, and or set the bar high, be the example. I think that we live in a world that might be kind of slipping away, because unfortunately, examples that are in front of us through social media and TV and all that, these celebrities are examples of not always exactly what we need to be following. Now, there's great ones, but I think that we need to remember that the example that we're following is Christ, and we are called to be an example of Christ-likeness.
Yeah, I think that's really good, because what we're trying to say is that you can never be Christ, right? You cannot be Jesus. You cannot be that perfect as Christ was. But how can we be those examples in our own community? There are a lot of young people that are have very prominent places of position in sports and in all sorts of different capacities. But one of the things that I'm noticing is, where is their relationship with God in those places? And you can be the best player or the best individual at a game or anything, but if you don't have that righteousness to shine through, to stand in a gap where everybody else's language is really bad, there's not talking good language and doing things. So a perfect person of faith will become qualified to repair the gaps in a community that has fallen into disrepair, not by our own strength, but by the strength of the Holy Spirit. And how does that look? How does it look? It is found in Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23.
But the Holy Spirit produces this kind of fruit in our lives: love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, and self-control. There is no law against these things.
Those really speak volumes.
Mm-hmm.
How are you doing on them, right? That's the question to be really to everybody. How have you been doing on these? Because the chapters in Ezekiel, it doesn't get better. I mean, it just shows how everything is just crumbling around and falling apart. And ultimately, they will all be carted off into captivity. And sometimes I think that we can live in a community and live in captivity because we are not, the people that God can use in the gaps of righteousness.
We should be the example of love in our community.
I like that.
We should be the example of joy, of peace, of kindness, of gentleness, of self-control. I mean, I don't think we get up every day and focus of how can I be an example of these fruit of the Spirit? And what if we did? And living that out, because that's Christ's likeness that people should see, well, wow, he or she, there's something different about them. And that's what we're called to do each and every day.
I mean, if we could be just obedient to Galatians chapter 5, verses 22 and 23, imagine the difference it would make in the world. Huge difference in the world. And, when we talk about transforming a world that looks like it's on fire, how do we do that?
And it's important that we remember that this next generation, we are responsible. I mean, God's got the ultimate plan. God knows how all things are going to end up and how they're going to go. However, we are being called and being used to be an example to this next generation for what they're seeing as they continue on until Christ returns. So our question, does your life reflect a good example of following Jesus regardless of your circumstances?
I don't know. When circumstances go bad,
I'm not very joyful or patient,
Nope.
or when you're in that waiting game. So just kind of reflect on that and talk about that as you think about circumstances you may be in right now, or ones you just came out of, and ask yourself, where was my joy, my peace, my patience, my gentleness, my kindness, my self-control? Like, was it present? Or, is two out of,
you'll never be perfect
three,
in all of them. Right. You'll never be perfect,
I got
but-
two. I got three.
Yeah.
It's not going to work. So make it a great week. And next week, you will read chapters 25 through 32. Have a great week. See you next time on TGIF. Bye.